Hello. In this video, we'll be talking about the cheesecake in the Dutch. D4, F5, and
Dutch defense is when black plays f5, clamps down on the center, on the e4 square, and it gets a little different. It's different than usual because normally we would play the stone wall, right? We'd play e3, and then bishop David 3. And the thing about an f4 soon, again, the stone wall is about pawns on dark, pieces on light.
You want to attack the light squares, but they've already blocked the light diagonal, so we're not going to play the stone wall anymore, not least because they can play the symmetrical stone wall if we do, and that gets kind of locked up and we don't really have much winning chances. But second of all, because we've weakened the e4 square without getting too much compensation, as he has control over this diagonal, and he can play d6 to control the e5 square, so black would have pretty flexible play. So instead, we're going to go for the cheesecake.
Yes, he makes it a little bit more difficult than usual. We're going to try to mate him in the stone wall.
Yeah, let's keep it simple.
And when he plays f5, if we go back and move, please. In the stone wall, we're going to try to play e3, bishop David 3, the normal e3, bishop David 3, and try to mate him. His f pawn is already there. We saw in the King's Indian when they have g6 already there. Here he has f5. There's no need to fight an uphill struggle, and we're going to try to look for a different way. That's going to be the cheesecake.
That's right. So when we play the cheesecake, you've probably already seen from a previous chapter the approach we want to use. We play bishop e2, we castle, we play b3, bishop b2, we get a pretty general setup. We're often slightly better because of our space advantage. We might push d5 later. But how this would vary compared to some of the fianchetto lines against like the King's Indian, for example, is that black is just probably not going to play d6 and e5. And the pawn break he's going to play for is more likely c5, or he'll play d5 and go for a stonewall setup.
Show that in c5. Yeah, there's a few lines they'll play c5, maybe d5. But the cheesecake is nice. We're going to build patiently and let him feel overextended with f5, which is often an issue. It's a bit overextended.
This is going to be very similar to the sidelines in the cheesecake variation of the King's Indian, where black doesn't play for e5 and white has slightly better because of the space, and in a lot of those variations, f5 is weakening. It's been said, sometimes the problem with the Dutch defense is that sometimes black's best move is f5 to f7, and we'd like to show that to be the case here, although we might not get too much. So e6, well, let's just say g6 for a moment. It's sort of the same. White has a bit of a space advantage.
Yeah, building up, and there's a certain squeeze with the dark bishop. We're going to look to play c4 soon and build a healthy mini bishop on light. And we're looking to play maybe soon d5. Again, d5 is always up there. To really clamp down, if we notice e6 is a little bit sensitive.
Right, like if they try to play d6, well, they've already played f5, which means that d5 and knight d4, knight e6 becomes an idea.
Yeah, and e6 is already sensitive because once the f-pawn moves, we're going to show that, the f-pawn moving means that e6 is already close to being an issue.
Right, so when we played that, we were talking about how d5 is sometimes good and sometimes bad in the other cheesecake variations, but with f5, d5 is almost always good as a structural idea after development.
Yeah.
So you can apply a lot of the same ideas by analogy here, especially because this is a closed position and we're playing based on typical ideas. Typical ideas, piece placement, same weaknesses, and so forth. It's not like there's a lot of tactics happening. Tactics require open lines, and nobody's done any pawn breaks yet. Which is why a strategic repertoire like this, which aims for typical setups and typical structures, can be consistently effective. At least for getting the ideas that you are used to on the board. d5? Well, we could talk about that soon. That's the cheesecake versus stonewall. But bishop e7, it's sort of, in the sidelines, it's sort of the same. We get our space advantage, and sometimes d5 is strong. We also could consider trading the light squared bishops with either knight d4 after knight d2 and bishop f3, or maybe d5 with knight d4 and bishop f3 coming after that. Black is probably a little bit worse here.
Yeah, I mean, often even knight to d2, if we want to show that, the knight coming back to,
in
some cases, knight David 2, bishop f3, he takes our bishop, we take back with the queen will act
as a second light bishop.
And I think in general, when the expression, the bigger they are, the harder they fall, he's putting his pawns all on light to kind of clamp down. If we show the diagonal, d5, he's trying to really clamp down. And when often we get d5 in, we get pawn David 5, we get that in anyways, and it hurts with the knight coming d4. And
right.
e6 if he prevents it, then good. But it's so easy to get, and then it hurts harder. And with his pawn on f7, it's not a big deal. But with already played
We'd
f5,
be,
it hurts more.
we'd be busting through on that diagonal. And this is really interesting and a really typical idea. Zaitsev talks about this in his book, Attacking the Strong Square. If the opponent overprotects a certain square, or a certain point or whatever, and then you manage to break through there anyway, it ruins their harmony if it actually works.
Yeah, if they work hard and it still gets through, then it hurts harder.
So d5 would, like, if it works, it would ruin black's position, basically.
And yeah, d5 usually gets. So whenever I see this, I'm like, light. I just think light, feel the light energy. The cheesecake we've seen mostly being dark. Interestingly, because it's been often about the dark, it's not the case necessarily here. So the bishop on b2 is nice, but he didn't fianchetto. There's no weaknesses on dark. If we want to just show that, normally he has some weaknesses.
We'd be trying to exploit this weakened diagonal in the case of the King's Indian setup, but that's not possible here. In this case, though, black has played f5. He has committed himself somewhat, and white has more space in general, whereas f5 with space on the king side is a bit risky if black doesn't get a king side attack. And he probably won't, because, like, for example, if knight d4, we always would have, like, knight d2, we can start exchanging, and after these exchanges, f5 can look a bit silly, especially with this diagonal.
Yeah, I've always felt overrated. This lines here for black, it feels a bit overrated, and I think black has to prove that he's not just in some long-term issue. I will say it's easy to rush as white.
Well, yeah,
and to get you having trouble, but again, sitting on the position, enjoying the cheese, the slow, the cheese cake.
We have
coffee with the cheesecake, maybe.
Would it be fair to say that white has some static advantage here?
Yeah, more potential, more potential. There's too many breaks, and black is like, oh, what to do now? What to do? And black has to, like, kind of stay. If he moves any pawn, d6, we want to just show any pawn moving, d6 weakens e6.
And then maybe knight g5 would be good?
Not now.
Oh,
not now.
maybe?
Later. No. The threat is stronger than execution. We don't need that. We don't need it. No, knight g. No, maybe like d5. But why not just d5 right away? I think.
Does this work? Can you take it?
Pawn takes. Yeah. Oh, then pawn takes. Yeah.
Oh,
bishop c4. Bishop c4.
Oh yeah, and there's also ideas
he's
like.
Almost dead. No. Even this you could even take and he's dead. Like it's
wow,
just too easy.
wow.
Knight c3 and it's over. Knight c3. I mean,
not only do we win the pawn back, but his bishop's all blocked. You have the d4 square.
Yeah. So exactly. So
this is really interesting. What about bishop f6 here?
Queen David too, I guess. Yeah.
And then we're taking on d5 anyway, probably, or maybe, or even either way, it doesn't matter. We're winning these at some point. The bishop is paralyzed.
We don't even want them. It's too good.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, rook a to d1.
We could even consider maybe this, perhaps.
Absolutely, we're better over so.
Oh, this is so interesting. It was like that. What was it? It was Petrosian versus Botvinnik, right? Was it? I think it was. It was World Championship 1963, round 5. I think it was, or somewhere around there, where there was the isolated d pawns, and then there was the e pawns with the e4 outpost for the knight, and the same structure is coming up again. It seems to be such a thematic idea.
Yeah, it's good. That's good.
Right, and there's other ways white can play, of course, as well. It's just sort of like
actually, if we go back a second, d5 and then line, this line d5, pawn takes, knight takes, bishop c4.
Mm-hmm.
Bishop c4, c6, knight c3, I think right away.
Oh yeah, that's much simpler.
Right, yeah, and then bishop f6 doesn't work, right? Because bishop f6 now knight takes d5. And no, discover check. I mean, I think it's too strong. Knight takes b6 at least, a minimum.
Oh yeah, that's true.
I mean, maybe. Okay, I don't know.
That's good. Yeah, anyway, but there's so many ideas here, and I'm just sort of thinking back about like how.
But again, d5 being a grip.
Oh, I remember this. This was like several years ago. I was reading through Peter Romanovsky and his book Soviet Middle Game Technique, and he was showing this setup for black, not against white's exact piece formation, but he was talking about how black's idea with this setup is he's trying to eventually get a kingside attack. Like maybe he would have control over the e4 square, and this e4 outpost combined with kingside space might allow like g5, g4 one day, or maybe rook f6, rook h6 with queen h4. Like here, it's not quite working. Black's piece formation's a little bit weird. The bishop's on e7 instead of d6, and maybe it's not as good of a version here. But I was so impressed by that. It's like on move 2, you can come up with like you're having a pawn structure that suddenly allows your whole ideal strategy for the next 15 moves to be like to some degree known. What? That's incredible. And I called my friend up and tried to explain. It's like, holy cow, this is amazing. And I think I was already like 1700 at the time. It's like, but here it's like, so black has this potential dynamic advantage, but it's like, I don't see it working if white plays well. We can start exchanging pieces. By the way, d5 is so important, and so static might be more important here.
Sometimes interesting, just an idea for the students to keep in mind, and as a weapon is occasionally knight e1 to d3.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, and again, we say a Russian knight, I call it, because the Russian school, Petrosian, Spassky, what do we say? The Russian,
Yeah,
d3,
sure.
and the knight's there strong and goes swing to f4 sometimes.
Oh, that's really interesting. Is that because in some positions we're playing like this and we want to target e6?
Absolutely, especially when he plays d6. So just a weapon, just an idea to toy around with.
Yeah,
in some
sure.
cases. Okay.
There's a lot of ideas here. Okay, so going back to this position, let's say b3, 6 c5, bishop b2, takes.
Take with a knight, yeah.
Yeah, it's really important to take with the knight here. Black has two center pawns, but they're not very mobile. If black ever plays d5, both the e5 square would be weak, possibly the pawn. And white's...
the d pawn is a long-term backwards pawn, right? An open file.
Which makes it somewhat weak. We also have pretty smooth development. All our pieces are coming up pretty fast. Was it like rook ad1 here?
I would say rook ad1.
Because maybe we're going to play bishop f3 with rook e1 and e4 one day, maybe?
Yeah, you never know. I don't think rook c1, the file doesn't open on c1.
Right, that makes sense. It's not like black's going to play d5 and we're not going to exchange that.
So.
That's too weakening. He'd probably play d6 or something similar. Yeah, that makes sense.
And again, the d7 is weak. If he plays d5, then e6 is weak. If we want to just show that for a moment.
Yeah, sure. Maybe then his bishop would be tied here, and he'd rather put it on the long diagonal. So black is under some pressure here. White's pieces are harmonious. Maybe even bishop f3, and it's hard to develop on that diagonal.
There's too many issues that those pawns. It's like a float. It's like a float, and just not a sturdy structure. It's like a float, which is like in the wind.
I just want to emphasize the white's bishop on d3 would be so much less effective hitting a wall here, and the fact that it can go to f3 says a lot. Not to mention that the queen is pressuring this backward pawn just really emphasizes how much better of the bishop is on e2 than d3. Again, like the point is that when they play the pawn break, and they will play a pawn break, otherwise they're just much worse, then our bishop is off of the open file. Our bishop is not more active on d3, it actually has more potential on e2, and we have pressure down the open file. So this is a clear example for why our bishop belongs on e2 in the cheesecake positions.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? In this exact position, if the f5 pawn was back in f7, I believe black is equal. Or close to equal. I believe it's close. If you put the f... Then he's okay. Then he could play d5, knight c6, and it's actually very comfortable.
It's just too easy to develop, right?
Yeah, it's normal, and that's why we're seeing what we're punishing. The cheesecake is punishing. Is a nice punishment against the Dutch. Again, it's always complicated. There's no magic wins or magic big advantages, but black has to be careful. He tries to play these moves that normally look okay. The cheesecake pounces. We wait. There's too many holes.
We're playing for a harmonious structure with ideal piece placement and clear improvement. And if they just play some random structure without having the piece placement for it, then they'll have some weaknesses. So, moving on from bishop e7, let's look at d5, the Stonewall. Cheesecake versus Stonewall. I almost want to eat this now because we're running out of theory to use this. We'd probably eat our cheesecakes in the model game section, but we'd probably finish it off before then. It's just too good. Yeah, I was snacking on this right before. I couldn't help it. It's just too smooth, too rich. Just like some of these positions. So here, so we're going to be trying to exchange the dark square bishop, similar to how the most challenging lines against our Stonewall attack is where they try to trade our light squared bishops, and how sometimes in those positions we have to play very accurately or even choose a different setup. So here, let's just say castles, c4, b3, and then we play for bishop a3. And their typical ideas, which they like to go for, knight e4, queen f6, g5, g4, is a dark square attack on our king side. But
when they put all the pawns on light, they're by definition weak. They're trying to attack us in the dark with the bishop, but also weak, right?
It's like if the attack fails because the bishops are exchanged, then there's potentially some weaknesses here. And also black has done tempo compared to Stonewall attack. Of course, this is
the weakest square on the board for black. He has a very specific weakness. He has a very specific weakness here. We could just show the e5 square, right?
Yeah, sure. Also, like
e5 is a hole. And if the light square bishop is definitely a bad bishop, we're going to trade the bishops off.
To be clear, though, this is still a playable position for black, but he has to sort of...
Queen c1. Again, why queen e7?
Oh, yeah, to explain that. So, black tries to prevent bishop a3, our exchanging our bishops, so we insist with the idea of bishop a3, and we're a little bit better because we are exchanging their good bishop up. And we have a little bit of a space. Maybe e5 can be weak after exchanging.
It's a lot easier for white. It's much, much easier. And the queen, again, we could say the queen acts as?
A second dark bishop.
Dark
I
bishop,
do want
yeah.
to say though, White's advantage isn't too large. But Black has some problems to solve. Maybe he can solve them if he plays really well. Like B6 would be dark rebuild, Bishop B7, but he's the one who has to prove it. And of course, if he doesn't play Queen E7, things are just much easier because we haven't lost this time. We just exchange these bishops off. We bring the knight out, and they don't have color harmony in the same sense.
Yeah,
Though E5 square is weak, the bishop is restricted.
and the knight on E3 is a little misplaced. Let's see a couple more with Queen E7.
Yeah,
If he
Queen
goes
E7, maybe.
Knight C2, Knight C2 to E1. If we could show that E1
Yeah, this seems like a typical
to
maneuver.
D3, Russian knight, and then E5.
Maybe
yeah.
this, and maybe we can also.
Absolutely, absolutely, and then B4. Yeah, why not? Put the queen where the queen will probably be on the dark squares because we don't have a dark square bishop.
Oh yeah, that's true. And
The
maybe
queen will be happy to be act as a dark bishop.
yeah, sure. And maybe we're going to pawn storm the queen side, or
Maybe.
perhaps open the
I wouldn't. I
file.
wouldn't move the C pawn away. I would kind of keep the pressure.
Oh yeah, because then they might. Well, is E5 ever an option if and only if you can't take here?
Yeah. Again,
Right,
so we're
right.
going to keep pressure on the center to make sure he doesn't have any funny moments to try and play E5. We keep him honest. Keep the pawn on C4. Expand Queen C1, boy 2, B4, A4, and we could just happily play. There's no attack on our king. I think we're pretty comfortable.
So in summary, against the cheesecake, against the Dutch, we're going to play the cheesecake variation with bishop knight F3, bishop E2, castles kingside, B3, bishop E2, and all of our typical ideas apply. We're generally slightly better, and we're going to play C4 with some space advantage. The difference is that D5 becomes a lot stronger against the F5 lines. And if they play a stonewall, we're going to still play the same setup, but instead of bishop B2, we're going to play bishop A3, exchange the dark square bishops off, and we're going to insist on this. This is the key strategic idea. If they prevent it with queen E7, we need to remember the plan of bishop B2, queen C1, bishop A3, or else black has a good game. Then we're going to be a little bit better. Black has to solve some problems because of his light square bishop.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the times here you just got to wait for black to see what he's doing. Don't if you look at students have often said, oh, in the Stonewall I have a plan. I think we talked about this before, but Stonewall I have a plan, but in the cheesecake, no, I don't know what to do. What's the plan? And we just said about how waiting, just building a position, improving the worst piece, and I think this is especially important against the Dutch. Because there he's kind of weakening, but you kind of want to gauge. Is he trying to attack? Do I trade the dark bishop? Do you just build queen c2, build up, maybe a d5 the right moment? You just wait and kind of tinker and let him kind of suffer, feel a little bit funny with the overextended f5. Make him wish he was played f5, f7. Make him wish he had to go back, and it's he wants to go back.
Like in these positions, sometimes the E5 square. Like we're always careful in the stonewall. We're playing for the light square attack when we're playing the stonewall attack. We don't want to be outrun on light squares. The same thing. Black doesn't want to have his dark square bishop exchanged and then lose the battle on the dark squares.
I would almost say like the longer the game goes, you automatically you're just better. It's like an interesting phenomenon in the Dutch. Where like the cheesecake, you sit on the position, it'll improve. Like the longer it goes. Just stay with him, and then like f5 is that long-term concession. It's a big concession. It means there's no f6, which means if we want to show that the pawn in f6 sometimes would have blocked the dark bishop. If we have a bishop on b2, and not necessarily even in this variation, but
it's not so related to this variation specifically.
Yeah,
it's just more like the concept.
It's very committal, very committal.
Concept of f5 in general. Perhaps it's more relevant to like these lines, right?
Yeah, that's better. Yeah. Good.
So I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the model game section.